first of all, we need a clear victory in this war. And then we need to show that it was a bad idea to start it, so that the price would be heavy. And the price that, according to their theology, makes jihad unprofitable is if you lose land. In the Muslim Brotherhood theology, there are two conditions where you get a waiver from the responsibility to fight jihad. And that's when you're too weak and you can't do it, and when the war would cost waqf, desecrated, not desecrated, hallowed land, hallowed Muslim land. So Israel should exact a price in land. I'm not sure that we can do it because Israel has not yet internalized the seriousness of the situation. And I think there's something comforting in the fact that we keep talking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as if that was in any way the issue now. The day after the two-state solution is a pie in the sky. It's completely off the table. No one in Ra'anana is going to live 5 minutes from the next terror state. So this is a pie in the sky, but the very fact that we are discussing this as if this was the issue is testimony to the fact that people have not internalized what has happened, and that this is not another round in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is the first Israeli-Iranian war. And what Israel would need to do now is probably a decade of wars that we would initiate, or some that we would have to initiate. And think of the international environment. The international community and the United States are pressuring us to stop a war that we didn't start. We need to start a war with Hezbollah. We can't have those Nazis on our border. They've moved the security zone into Israel. We've evacuated part of Israel. They've virtually conquered part of Israel, and we have this monstrous force that the United States is now protecting on our border. So we are going to have to do something about that, and that is not the end of it. Until we defeat Iran's bid to regional hegemony, we will not be safe.
You just said that you have a monstrous force that the U.S. is now protecting?
Yeah.
You mean the U.S. is protecting Hezbollah?
Yeah. Yeah, the U.S. is protecting Hezbollah. This is what they've been... People here, first of all, people have fantasies about the U.S. The U.S. is a mythical entity which is our benevolent overseer. And the whole Israeli left has learned to count on the United States to be the responsible adult, to force us to do what we don't yet understand we should. So the left is not able to win elections with a two-state solution, so it hopes that this will be imposed on us by the Americans. And the assumption is that the Americans have got our back. And that's not a correct assumption. The people here think of the United States only in bilateral concepts, as if this was a marriage, as if this was a sibling relationship, and they don't look what's going on around. So Americans, the current American administration can easily fool Israel with just some nice talk. And people are not realizing that they're doing here what they're doing all over the Middle East, which is appeasing Iran. What they are, the whole philosophy, and I think the American public certainly doesn't understand this because it's not interested enough in foreign policy, and democratic American administrations don't tell the truth about appeasing Iran to its public because that's not a popular cause. But what they're doing in the Middle East ever since Obama was their working assumption is that the problem in the Middle East are America's allies, and that's us, and the Saudis, and the Egyptians, and the Jordanians. They are the problem. The problem is that these are capable of dragging America into yet another war, and the coming war is going to be with Iran, and the danger is that the Saudis and the Israelis will drag America into a war with Iran. Therefore, the basic idea is America should move away from its allies, closer to Iran, and appease it, because that's generally the progressive and the post-colonial view of the world. You hug, they are the victims, and so they need a hug. This is Obama's infamous Cairo speech. And so they're like the third world indigenous people are like children, and they're like bullies, and we should know that bullies are bullies because they're in pain, and so we should hug them. That's exactly the same philosophy in international relations, and that is what they are doing. So they're appeasing Iran. So they're talking about regional integration. What is regional integration? Who is going to be integrated? Iran is going to be integrated. Obama used to say the Saudis need to learn that they will have to share the neighborhood with Iran. And so that is what they've been doing all along. And therefore, what is going on now in the region is that over our heads, the Americans and the Iranians are vying for power positions and negotiating an accommodation. So America keeps signaling, we will not attack Iran. If you exaggerate, we will hit your proxies mildly, but we would not destroy them.
What do you mean if you exaggerate?
If you exaggerate, if you keep hitting shipping in the Houthis in Bab el-Mandeb,
the Red Sea.
If you keep, this is a major international commerce artery. If you exaggerate there, we will bring our Iron Dome and we'll protect the ship. Why do you bring an Iron Dome instead of attacking them? This is a little terror organization that the Biden administration took out of the terror organization list in order to signal to the Iranians that we are not after you, and we will turn our backs to the Saudis if we need to. That's the first thing they did when they came into office, is take the Houthis out of the terror organization list. So they're not, and you ask what is exaggerating? If they kill American personnel. They killed they've attacked American forces since October 7 about 120 times, I think, maybe more by now. And America generally did nothing.
Do you mean escalating when you say exaggerating? You're like escalating?
No, because they are escalating. Mm-hmm. When they escalate too much. What is too much? If you actually hit American servicemen, 3 were killed, we are going to talk a lot about retaliation and then warn you long enough in advance so that nothing really happens. Because what we really think should be done is de-escalation. That's their mantra everywhere. And de-escalation, if you're the superpower and you declare you're going to de-escalate, you're doing the exact opposite of deterrence. If you're saying, we will not escalate, don't worry, we're your, if not your friends, we can be partners. And so Iran is undeterred, and it's getting more and more audacious all over. And now think of what the Americans did right after October 7th. They arrived. The president arrived here after he gave a speech in which he said that any state or organization that thinks it can take advantage of the situation, I have one word for them: don't. Israel applauded this because they said, they're now saving us from Hezbollah. We don't need a second front with Hezbollah before we can get our bearings. But this was directed at us too. And he made clear it was directed at us too, that we should not take advantage of the situation and preempt Hezbollah. So don't was also directed at us. And the American force that arrived here came here to prevent a war. And ever since, and what they did is the Israelis asked that the joint statement after the Netanyahu-Biden meeting would be that Iran is behind this. And the Americans put a veto and refused to say anything about Iran. And ever since, they've been framing this as a Israeli-Palestinian, another act in the long Israeli-Palestinian conflict, And therefore, they are talking about an Israeli-Palestinian solution, the two-state solution. But that is not a solution. A solution is to break the ring of fire that Iran has circled us with. And we now know what their strategy is. The ring of fire is Qasem Soleimani's life work. This is what they labored to do: surround Israel with proxy forces in order to deter Israel from attempting to attack their nuclear program. That was the philosophy. And this is what they taught Hamas. And Hamas have tried it. There's an inner ring that Hamas employs, and there's the outer ring. My friend Professor Kobi Michael calls it that Hamas has an Iranian insurance policy. So Hamas is, ever since it was trained by Iranians and learned to think like the Iranians, is thinking in terms of a multi-front eruption. And this is what they tried to do on October 7. It didn't succeed the way they thought, because they've tried it before in what they called Al-Quds sword, the sword of Jerusalem, and we called Guardian of the Walls, which was Hamas gave Israel an ultimatum in May 2021, and the ultimatum said, if you don't clear something from East Jerusalem, if you don't, it had to do with Temple Mount. They had some ultimatum about Temple Mount. If you don't do this, we'll attack you. And they did right on the hour that they said they would. And then pogroms inside Israel, which the Israeli media tried to hide as violence on both sides. But a few Jews were lynched in Arab Jewish cities.
When you say lynched, that means something different here than it does in the U.S. What does that mean?
I'm not sure it's that different. It means ganging up on someone and beating them to death. I think there was one casualty and 2 seriously wounded in such lynching. I saw a video that a son of a friend of mine shot when he was reversing his car, and Arabs in Ramle were chasing them with axes in their hands. So people were lynched, people were beaten up, people were attacked by Israeli Arab citizens who have been radicalized. Then there's Judea and Samaria, where that's the second front where the eruption should come. Then there's East Jerusalem, the third front. There's Gaza, and there is Hezbollah. And Hezbollah is already the entrance to a larger ring, which consists of Hezbollah in Lebanon, Shiite militias in Syria and West Iraq, and the Houthis in the south, and in the southwest, Hamas. So the idea is that all these should erupt together, and Israel should be ready to start breaking that noose, which will soon have a nuclear umbrella. And so what I've been saying, and people don't really want to listen, but one of the first things I wrote in Ma'ariv was that this is not just back to 1948, which means existential danger. It's also like 1956, because in 1955, the Egyptian regime under Gamal Abdel Nasser struck a weapons deal with the Soviet Union known as the Czech weapons deal. And this tilted the balance of power in their favor. And ever since, Ben-Gurion understood that we will have to intercept the noose that Egypt is trying to build around us under the pan-Arab philosophy, uniting the whole Arab world into one nation state, and then eradicating the Zionism. So we initiated a war, along with the British and the French, to the chagrin of both the United States and the Soviet Union, who in rare cooperation ended up passing a joint resolution in the UN Security Council demanding all the forces retreat to the status quo ante, where they were before the war. Israel managed to managed to exact some advantages, some of which are, we still say that ever since we have weapons of mass destruction according to the foreign press. So that was one achievement, apparently according to the foreign press, of that war, but also it was a massive blow to the Egyptian army, which gave us 10 years of quiet in order to establish a very new state that had to absorb an immigration population twice the size of its citizenry. So that's
from the surrounding
from surrounding Arab countries and from displaced persons in Europe after the Holocaust. So in the first 7 years of Israel, from 48 to 55, we tripled the population, and that's an amazing fiat, considering that it didn't topple the structure, the regime. Not to mention that we stayed democratic after that large shock.
And it was about half from Europe and half from the neighboring.
Yeah, I think from the neighboring countries it was more. I think about the numbers were around, I guess, 1 million, but don't.
Yeah, I thought it was about 900,000 to 1 million from the
surrounding areas who were kicked out of Arab countries ever since the state was established. So that was the first in a series of wars. It was initiated by Israel. Then came the 6 Days War, and then the image of a siege around us was really strong. People talked about, I might have mentioned this, there were jokes like the last to leave the airport should turn off the lights, because people felt this is the end, because now it was a joint command under Nasser that was surrounding us with armies in Jordan and in Syria. And then came the war of attrition, and then came the Yom Kippur War. And then only after all these came the peace in 1979. So it took 25 years to break the encirclement that Egypt tried to strangle us with. And now we face a new noose being tied around us. So how long will it take? I don't know. If there was a different American administration, wasn't appeasing Iran but deterring Iran, we would have been in a completely different place. Maybe the Iranian regime would collapse. Maybe there would be a revolution in Iran. Maybe there'd be another war in, I don't know, 5-10 years from now with other forces. But for now, what it looks like is Iran is just getting stronger. It's getting backing from the Russians and the Chinese, and we are facing mortal danger without a major consistent superpower alliance. As long as the Americans are appeasing Iran, the danger is just increasing. So we are in a very dire situation in which I think we need to completely change our frame of mind, stop bickering about Netanyahu or anti-Netanyahu. This solution to the Palestinian Israeli-Palestinian conflict, or that solution, it's not the issue. It's talking about the solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict now is like arranging furniture on the deck of the Titanic after it drowned. It's completely irrelevant to our current situation. It has nothing to do with the dangers we're actually facing, but people are not willing to let go of their habits of thought.
Well, one thing that happens is that people in the U.S. get very upset about anybody here rejecting the idea of a Palestinian state. What is the all of the surrounding issues aside for a moment, what's the case for rejecting a Palestinian state?
the Palestinian national movement is not busy thinking about nation building, and it doesn't want a state. So the idea is preposterous because there is no Palestinian partner in the effort to build a state. What they are doing is attempting to destroy Zionism. That's not the same thing. So
destroying Zionism means destroying the state of Israel.
Yeah, absolutely. They are not willing to accept any sovereign Jewish presence anywhere in the land of Israel.
And so let me just back up for a moment. A two-state solution requires essentially being a Zionist, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to accept the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish state for there to be two states, Israel being one of them. So the question when the answer to the question of why no two-state solution, people don't say because you have to accept Israel and that's not on the table, on the other side. People say because Netanyahu has declared that there will be no Palestinian state and he never wanted one. What's the answer to that?
Both. After October 7, there will be no way to convince the Israeli public to agree to a Palestinian state.
Okay, but assume for a moment that there was a way for a Palestinian state to exist, to be peaceful, to peacefully coexist with Israel and accept Israel as a legitimate sovereign state, as a legitimate sovereign Jewish state. Wouldn't the people of Israel accept that?
If there would be no gravity, they would accept flying.
I see, but just hypothetically, right? I mean,
Yeah,
don't people want to live in peace?
What do you mean hypothetically? We already showed we want to. We went for the Oslo agreement from the first moment. They never, for one moment, intended a two-state solution for two peoples. And there was an instruction with Sai Barikat, who ran the negotiations for a while. He instructed his team never to say two states for two peoples, but only two states living side by side in peace. What is the difference? The difference is that the Palestinians demand one nation state for the Palestinian, ethnically cleansed of any Jewish settlers, and another non-national state into which the Palestinian diaspora will return. That is what they call the right of return. There was never a Palestinian leader who was willing to even give an inch on the so-called right of return, which is not a right and also not a return, because these people are not refugees. They call it the right of the Palestinian refugees to return. These are not refugees, they've been resettled. And these are the sons and daughters and grandchildren, maybe, of refugees of the 48 war. But basically, they want two Muslim majority states. That's what they're talking about. And we don't listen to them. When Arafat came here, he said to his people, remember Hudaybiyah. This is the agreement that the Prophet Muhammad did with a tribe that he signed a peace accord with them. And then the moment he was strong enough, he broke the accord and attacked them and killed them. And so from the first minute, Arafat has been saying to his people, don't worry, Oslo is Hudaybiyah. Don't worry, we're not actually going for it. And Israel refused to acknowledge that. And the press had a massive disinformation campaign. And I know this because my friend, and it's now a famous story. But my friend, Yigal Karmon, was an advisor on terrorism to two prime ministers. When Arafat came here in 1994, after the Gaza and Jericho first agreement, and he gave these speeches about how the Palestinian mission is jihad against the Jews. And he came to Nachum Barnea, who was the most important columnist of Yediot Achronot, then the most important daily. And he said, here are the speeches recording, you remember there was once clunky video cassettes with Hebrew subtitles. Listen to this. And Nachum Barnea said that he won't publish it. And there's a controversy about why, because Yigal Karmon keeps saying that Nahum Barnea said, there's no such thing as truth, there's only versions, and your version promotes the enemies of peace. Nahum Barnea denies that, but and keeps threatening to sue Yigal Karmon, but he hasn't. And what he doesn't deny is that he refused to publish it. And Dan Shiftan, another friend of mine, came to then we had only one channel, came to the state-run, our NPR, basically television, Channel 1 television, and they also refused to publish it because they were so set on the dream of Oslo. And what it was is that we imagined that Palestinian national movement in our own image. We knew that Zionism was about self-determination and state building, and we assumed that that is what they want. And this is a mistake we make in the West all the time. This is why we're not ready for Hamas. Because, we had the Obama philosophy that everyone wants to grow up their children in peace. Everyone wants a decent living in a nice house. Well, no, apparently not. And since we assumed that they were deterred. One of the heads of national intelligence, who is the head of it, in Israel it's the head of the army intelligence, said, I don't even have to look at the intelligence to know that Hamas will not attack Israel.
He said this.
He said this. He was retired by then, and he was, I think, at INSS at that point, and Tamir Ayman. And he said about a few weeks before the attack, he said, people are calling me hysterically and saying Hamas is going to attack Israel. And he said, I don't even have to look at the intelligence to know they are not, because I know what their interests are, and their interests are not to attack Israel. And
he said it wouldn't be in their interest?
Yeah, because they are deterred, since there are carrots and sticks. We give them employment and we allow Qatarian money, and so they will not give up prosperity for a war they cannot win. And this is just completely misunderstanding. This Yahya Sinwar is a very religious person, and we are not taking their theology seriously, because you can't say this in an American university, and so you can't say this in any university, because there's a hierarchy. Because if you want to be a professor anywhere, you need letters from American university, you need to publish in American journals, and you cannot say that Islam is not a religion of peace. But the theology of the Muslim Brotherhood, who keeps saying we love death more than life, they take it seriously. They take it seriously. So when you listen to a young terrorist calling his father on the phone and bragging that he just killed 10 Jews with his own hand, and asking to bring his mother on the phone, and his mother said, I wish I was there with you. So this is not our mentality. We cannot understand this based on our values. And we live in a world where everybody's talking about the other and diversity, but there's no one as deaf to otherness as the progressives. They imagine everybody to be exactly like them. Everybody would love diversity exactly like them.
Except Jews.
Except Jews what?
They don't imagine Jews to be
exactly like them. They no, because Jews are the hegemonic oppressors, and so the world is divided dichotomously between oppressed and oppressors, and we are the oppressors. So, as Batya Sargon-Unger put it so beautifully, so the women who were mutilated and raped by Hamas, that was their fault. They are to blame because they're the oppressors, and even death does not relieve them of that burden. So we were completely unable to imagine the Palestinian national movement. The Palestinians support the atrocities of October 7 in massive numbers, a great majority, about 72%, I think, in recent polls, but the whole Palestinian people, more in the West Bank than in Gaza, but also in Gaza, there's still a majority supporting Hamas and supporting the atrocities of October 7, which they consider a great victory. Someone who studies them told me that Yahya Sinwar now for them is the new Salah ad-Din. He is now the
Grand Mufti.
the hero of the whole Arab nation.
My recollection is the last numbers I saw was something like 50% in Gaza and 85 or something percent in the West Bank, 83 maybe percent in the West Bank. I don't know if there have been numbers since then.
There's a very recent poll by Khalil Shkaki. I don't recall the numbers off the top of my head, but you can check it. It was, I think, 10 days ago or something.
And were the numbers about the same? Or?
They were about the same.
Mm-hmm. And so that illustrates in a way that the campaign in Gaza is productive in changing minds, if not hearts.
I wouldn't say that, because while you are out of your home or your home has been destroyed and you are under danger, then you react to the present. Once the war is over, and if we don't win it decisively, then this would go down as, imagine this. It's Assisi in Egypt once said that Egyptians should be proud about the war of Yom Kippur because they almost defeated a Mercedes with a Susita. It's a car you don't know, let's say a Subaru. They said, we had nothing, and this is the monster. This is the high-tech army of the IDF. And so imagine that little Hamas brought Israel to its knees. That is, if this stays as it is, if the Americans get their way and prevent victory in this war, our blood will be in the water for all the big sharks. And remember, Hamas is the smallest of our enemies. And if we can defeat the smallest of our enemies, then you bet that in Iran right now they're planning the next round, and the next round is going to be better coordinated.
So you started to say what the plan should be to manage this threat. And because they love, as you were saying, they say they love death more than they love life, then death is not a deterrent. And you said that land is what they want, so land is the deterrent. So what's the plan? I'm not going to say solution, but what would be the tactic with the land?
So I'm not sure, at least, that Israel has the stamina to do it, and don't forget that our government is also way too dependent on a military that has been raised in progressive universities and is more mindful of being moral than it is of victory. And so we have a very serious problem, and it just extended itself because the chief of the IDF, who is the greatest failure in the history of Israel, who is responsible for the unbelievable impotence of the morning of Shabbat on October 7, has just completed a round of appointments, which means that people in his own image, from an army that has internalized a defensive progressive philosophy that has learned to rely on technology instead of mass, is going to be perpetuated if we don't do something. And so this is very urgent. But if we had the stamina that I think we need, and we will probably gradually, I don't know what will happen in the next election, but 5 years from now, we will think of Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, and Smotrich as that moderate government that we once had. There is going to be, Israelis are massively moving to the right. The more they internalize the danger, the more they will move to the right. And what we need to do is transfer the rest of the the remaining population in the northern part of Gaza, all the way up to the Gaza River, which is south of Gaza City. The upper thirds of the Gaza Strip should be annexed to Israel.
Wow. That's I think, probably very controversial statement.
It's not that controversial among Israelis. We're not saying this. Politicians are not saying this because the people, international public opinion is not letting us win the war, not to mention annex any territory. But I think Israel should be bold, as I think Ben Gurion would be and was.
And what happens to the southern 2/3 and the people who are now relegated to living there?
Resettled there for now. We should also encourage immigration. There'll be a lot of people wanting to immigrate. We should do that. And in the long run, to the extent that we can think about it now, is some sort of local administration with the security responsibility fully in Israel's hands. We also, in the long run, need to dismantle the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, because the Palestinian Authority is a terror organization. There's just now out a report, we keep saying that there's Hamas and then the Palestinian Authority, there's the forces of war and the forces of peace. The whole Oslo framework was based on the idea that we can outsource security to the moderate Fatah, and they will stop Hamas from terror attacks. But there's out a new report by Regavim, it's something between a movement and a think tank. They call themselves a movement. Counting the people of the security apparatus of the Palestinian Authority who moonlight as terrorists themselves. And not only that, Palestinian Authority spokespersons brag that they do more attacks on Jews than Hamas does in the West Bank. They brag that they have 400 security prisoners in Israel, of their people, of their security personnel people, and over 2,000 martyrs, over 2,000 shaheeds who are employees of the security forces of the Palestinian Authority. And the Americans keep training them. They're supposed to be a police force. They're doing parachute training abroad. Why do police need to parachute anywhere? They're preparing an army. There are 30,000 of them. This is going to be, or possibly going to be, the next multi-theater attack will include the Palestinian Authority. We keep thinking that they will help us suppress terrorism. What they are saying, the Palestinian Authority pays people, incentivizes people to kill Jews. And the more you kill, the more money you get, your family gets. If you die, you get a lifetime stipend for your family. And if you're in an Israeli jail, the longer your sentence, the higher the pay. So this is an official policy. Also, everywhere you go in the Palestinian Authority controlled territories, the only heroes with whose names things are called are jihadists and terrorists. All of them. The schools, the squares, the streets, and if you look at Palestinian school books, I'll give you real examples. In a grammar lesson, you are supposed to punctuate the sentence, "Do not think of the occupiers as human." That is a sentence by which they teach you punctuation. Or if you study mathematics, then a rocket leaves Gaza in this and that speed. And how long will it take it to get in Tel Aviv with all the physics you need in between? And if you want it more morbidly, you're supposed to calculate what is the strength needed of two men to carry the casket of a martyr. So this is children who learn physics at age 13.
These are calculate.
the UNRWA schools as well, but the books in UNRWA and everywhere else, including Hamas, the books are all Palestinian Authority. So I interviewed Itamar Marcus from the Palestinian Media Watch, Palestine Media Watch, and he said, everybody thinks that October 7 was Hamas indoctrination. It's not. It's Palestinian Authority indoctrination. They've been indoctrinating children for 30 years now, since the Oslo Accord, on this philosophy that said that killing Jews and dying in the process is the highest commitment, the highest good, the highest moral value that one can achieve. And the Gaza Strip has been in the hands of Hamas only since 2007. So the people who attacked Israel on October 7 were actually raised on Palestinian Authority school books. So now we want the Palestinian Authority to be the solution, because it will be what, revitalized? Who will revitalize it? Swedes? What do they think will come out of this terror organization of terrorists in suits who are glorifying the slaughtering of innocent Jews? This is their philosophy, and we should stop trying to guess their intentions and assume that we will have to get ready according to their capabilities. And their capabilities are now an existential danger to Israel.
With 1 minute left, what are your final thoughts in this interview?
My hope is that first, we in Israel will realize that this is a war between civilization and barbarism, and that eventually the West will wake up, or at least read Samuel Huntington, and come to the realization that this war between civilization and barbarism is taking place all over the world, including on Harvard campuses, and that we need to start fighting this war instead of navel gazing and thinking about the purity of our conscience and engage in moral grandstanding, because the danger is real, because Europe is basically committing suicide and the United States is denying, but it may well be next. And I think that we have lost our immunity system, and it is maybe up to Israel to try and wake it up.
Thank you.